Hello and welcome everybody. My name is Margaret Pinard. Welcome to my channel. You are on Booktube and we are in the season of Agitation August. So welcome to the channel, welcome to Booktube, and make yourself comfortable. I'm going to ask my lovely guest, Marion, to introduce herself today as today's guest.
Hello, it's really nice to be here and good morning in your part of the world. I'm Marion. I'm writer in Rwanda. As the title suggests, I am based in Rwanda. And yes, today I am here to talk about emergency sex. And do you want me to go on about? Yes, snap. Do you want me to explain it, or do you want to?
I will jump in with an explanation of the series. So just for everyone who's coming in as a fan of Marion and doesn't know what Agitation August is, I am using August this year to dedicate to agitation, meaning that people I know who are smart and think critically about things, I'm asking them about a book that has shaken them up, has made them reconsider things in their lives or careers or communities, and just sort of engage with like how critical reading really helps bring us together as a community in various ways, and also just get to know really fun people in my Booktube community. So that is Agitation August, and that is why Marion is here today, and we're going to be talking about emergency sex. So please give us a little summary of what the book is about, and then we can dive in.
So basically, Emergency Sex is a book about 3 aid workers, 2 Americans and 1 New Zealander, who joined the UN as civilians, civilian observers back in the early 90s. And if you know your history, the early 90s was a very difficult time. It was when everything was kicking off. So you had Somalia, you had Haiti, you had Bosnia, and you had Rwanda, and they were all going off at the same time. The world was on fire, and it's their account of what it was like to be UN civilians during that time. And they pretty much went to every war zone at that time. So heavy reading.
Yes. And the book, in case you're interested, I just read it for this interview and gave it 5 stars. It's composed in a structure of going from best to worst security status, sort of like A to E, alpha to echo, I think it is. Yeah, alpha to echo. And so we sort of descend into this madness in the minds of 3 friends, basically like journal entries. And I found it very compelling, very starkly realistic in some places, and very 90s growing up, coming of age in other places. So it was pretty neat, and a really good read. So first question is going to be, Marion, you chose this as your book that shook you up. So a little bit more about your personal backstory about how you came to the book. And if people don't know and they're not from your community, but they're more from mine or just new to you, what is your relationship to this sort of like UN civilian worker content? Okay,
this book, I think, holds a very special place in the hearts of pretty much every VSO volunteer who passed through Rwanda at a certain time. So I ended up in Rwanda originally in 2007. I was a sign language researcher. I was a volunteer with VSO, which is Voluntary Services Overseas. For the Americans watching, that's kind of like the British Peace Corps. So they take professionals from different backgrounds and match them up in developing economies where, you know, they can make a difference. Our original logo was sharing skills, changing lives. I'm not sure that it still is, but that was the motto when I joined up. And so when I first arrived in Rwanda, I was living in a little house in Kigali, the capital, and I didn't have a radio. I didn't have a television. I didn't really have any books, because books back then and even today are quite rare. They're quite expensive and quite hard to find. And my one sort of escape, my retreat, was the resource room at VSO HQ, which was just down the road. And in there, we had one room with a dusty old computer and sort of ceiling to floor bookshelves just across the whole of one wall. And over the generations of volunteers that had come, they brought books with them, they put them onto the shelf. And, you know, that was where you went to escape. If you had like 5 minutes of peace, you'd go in there, you'd find a book and you'd borrow a book. And there was one book with mythic status. There was one book that you heard whispered about through the corridors.
Wow.
Yeah, people would come up to you and they'd say, you know, like, have you read it? And you'd be like, what? And they'd be like, Emergency Sex. Have you read it? And you're like, I have no idea what this is. And there was only, at the time, there was only one copy in the entire country that we knew of. And in order to read it, you had to put your name on a piece of paper.
Wait.
So, wow. Yeah. I was like, if everybody else is reading this book, I'm going to read this book. So I put my name on this piece of paper, and it was about 3-4 months into my stay here that it suddenly kind of landed in my lap, and I started reading. And one of the reasons, sorry, if you don't mind me going on about it a bit more, but
at one point, I'm going to interject to say some of this I've heard of in your series Revisiting Your Time. And what is that series called? Rwanda Now and Then?
Rwanda Now and Then, yeah. I'm going back through my diary. That I mean, I was a prolific blogger in the days before. I mean, YouTube.
And really you still have it, which is amazing.
I know.
Cloud somewhere.
I know, and I'm glad that I have, because there's so many details in there that I would never have remembered, you know, but it brings it back to read it. And I had it was kind of a surreal experience with this, because there's a chapter, like you said, it's split up into chapters of where they were when they, you know, these experiences happened. And towards the end, they end up in Rwanda. And they end up in a town called Kibuye, which is to the west of Rwanda on Lake Kivu. Very, very, very beautiful place. A place that a lot of people go on holiday, you know, for a weekend break for R&R. Wow. And I opened the chapter on Kibuye when I was sitting on a bus in Kibuye. It was one of those moments I opened it and I went like that. I was like, oh, because I'd actually been, it was 4 months into my stay, I went on my first R&R holiday. And I don't know if you remember, because you've read the book, and I don't want to go into graphic detail, but there is a part in there that talks about Banana Man. And I don't know if you remember the bit about Banana Man and the banana tree growing.
Yes.
Yeah. So for those who haven't read it yet, that there's quite a graphic description of, you know, excavating the bodies at the time. And it was a chapter that really kind of, it shivers sort of thing. Yeah. And at that time that I was reading, that the bus was going round, there's a little church in Kibuye, which is where I don't know for certain.
Is there a bell tower?
It's a little white church, and it's on a very steep hill, which is, they mention the steep hill, and outside there's a large memorial plaque, and I think it says 11,000 people. And so it was certainly very much known about from that time and excavated for the people who had died, but I don't know if it's exactly the same one. I wouldn't be surprised. And of course, this was first published, I'm going to go
2004 or 5, yeah.
2004, and I was reading it in 2007. So only a couple of years after it had been published. Yeah. And I just remember this very sort of immediate sense of, you know, when you're reading a book, you're there, you're seeing it, you're in the book. And then just looking out the window and suddenly being transported 13 years later to the actual present. And that weird transposition of what I was reading and being in the mod, it was memorable. It really, it stuck with me.
Took you up for sure. Yeah, because when I was reading this, I was wondering how close it would be to the book that left an impression on me when I was studying international development, was Delivering Development Assistance. Was the course, and there was a book in there that was really about like all the failures when AID, which is like DFID in Britain, where that's the people who go out and try to implement programs to help, you know, hunger and safety and, you know, economic development. how all these things can go wrong, how there's elite capture, how there's, you know, corruption, how there's just like twisted incentives and sort of people on power trips or whatever. And how like they wanted to give you this information before you go out and try to do anything so that you can beware of those sort of signposts. And yeah, being there already and having this drop, yeah, it must have been yeah, eye-opening if you had a peachy keen experience so far. But yeah.
I mean, I was a baby when I read this. I was fresh off of training. I was 26 years old. Yeah. I'd sort of dropped off a plane, and I was in Rwanda for the first time. And yeah, I was a baby development worker. I didn't know these things. Yeah.
Sort of terrifying. Okay, so let me get on to another question, because that's really affecting. So you read it a while ago, and in preparation for this, you said you reread it and sort of re-engaged with it. Was there anything that had changed in your perception or your like takeaways from it that you're like, oh, looking back 20 years later kind of
thing? Yeah, I mean,
that you
yeah. I mean, I was very, I was young and I was new when I read this. And also I think for even a lot of the older VSO who were reading it, they were new to development. And growing up, I don't know, have you ever heard of Comic Relief?
Yes.
Red Nose, yeah. So in the UK, you don't have that one in America, but you have something similar, I guess.
I remember Whoopi Goldberg and Robin Williams and Billy Crystal being the three, and it was something, maybe it was related, maybe it was the American version, but yeah, definitely like.
Yeah. It's like growing up, there was every few years, there was this telethon to raise money for international aid and development projects. And it was called Red Nose Day because in the UK, you had a little rubber red nose and you'd wear it to school like a clown. I mean, in the 80s, that was fun. That's what we did for fun in the 80s.
Yeah.
But yeah, growing up, you used to watch that. It was an all-night comedy skit to raise money, and you'd be watching that, and almost everywhere they went, they'd go to the refugee camps, and you'd see UN plastered on everything, and to me, I mean, the UN was on a pedestal. It was really up there. It's what you aspired to be as a development worker, and I think it came as a bit of a shocker to all of us to read it because, your whole life they'd had that sort of aura, they'd had that sort of mystique
veneration.
In a way.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, it's okay. You're all right. The UN have got it kind of thing. It's covered. And to read a lot of those things, when you're young and you're impressionable, it's interesting to see the other side of it. And that's why I think it fits in very well with Agitation August, because it's about whistleblowing, or not even deliberately going out to blow the whistle, but telling your story of what it's like on the other side of what you've always thought something was. And I always think those kind of books are really important.
Right. So just to mention a little bit more background about the book, if people are interested. So I got this copy from the library.
I didn't know there was a hard copy. That's
I know, amazing. It's still there. It's still around, which is great. Because, my books were put in and then they got taken out because they weren't checked out enough. So, people are checking this one out. But two things. The first is that the three people who are involved in different capacities. So one goes as a doctor, one goes as a lawyer-ish, and he turns into the lawyer, and then one goes as a civilian representative of like governance, security, sort of all hands on deck kind of thing. So we get different viewpoints. And there is a moment where someone who is in the lawyer role who is questioning, do I report this? When I went up the chain, it got stopped. Do I do it outside the chain? Like, what is my responsibility at this point? And so grappling with that was an interesting thing to see reflected in the book. The second thing I want to bring up is that you worked in a word. It's not necessary to be secretive about it, but I will just expose for everyone in case you're watching this lovely interview. We have bingo cards for the month to encourage people to watch all the interviews, and people who are guests on the channel are bringing a favorite fancy word, just like an SAT word, a $5 word, a £5 word. I don't know if that's enough, but just a word that is beautiful in the language, because along with critical reading comes vocabulary. And I just like to promote a nerdy word opportunity. So the word is
pedestal.
Nice sounding word. I like it.
I was trying to be subtle there.
I know. But I'm gonna make it easy for folks because it's not it's about participation. It's not about, you know, cake.
It's about the taking part, not about the winning. Okay, fair enough. Yeah. Just so what changed really then sort of later on in life when I went into development and I started with my own company and doing more sort of projects is I never worked for the UN directly. I delivered some training for some of their departments, but I did have some UN adjacent experiences that kind of, you know, I think if I had never read the book would have shocked me more than they did when I actually encountered that. So, you know, meetings that people, not just the UN, to be honest, but, you know, large development and aid organizations, because
including some that might no longer exist.
I'm trying to think of an example of
anyone is wondering.
No, that my goodness, that was a bombshell. That it was really sad. You might see there's a piano behind me, and I got that incredibly cheaply because somebody working for USAID had to make a quick exit. Yeah, so you know it's really sad. You know, people who had put so much effort and time into so many projects, and you don't get to see it through, and you know it's
I mean, it was already something that can change with each administration in terms of funding priorities, but to have it like wiped completely out, building taken over, like just hustled into nothing in the State Department is really like a slap in the face. So,
and for the cruelest of reasons, for the cruelest of reasons, and such dismissiveness. It's it's
So the book is nonfiction, and we have 3 author protagonists. Was there anyone that you identified with more than another? And for what reason?
Yes. I like them all. I do like them all. But I think for me, Heidi, the social worker, the female, it feels funny to call a living person a protagonist. I feel like it almost feels a bit, but yes, the female protagonist. And it was for one of the smallest reasons, because she talks a lot about some big events that go in, massive events that happen in her life, like earth-shattering events that happen in her life. But it was just one little thing she wrote about that just, it made me go, you know. There's a point at which she was working in Haiti, and they get evacuated from Haiti because the UN pulls out, and she gets sent off to this hotel in Mombasa, which is on the Kenyan coast. And the idea is sit by the pool, drink cocktails, R&R, just recover. And instead, she decides
like jumping out of her skin.
I think she does. She gets to a point of, I mean, that must be a head spin to have gone from, you know, the middle of an active war zone to sort of you can hear the music playing in the background. And sort of, you know what I mean? It's like, this is weird. So she decides just to go for a little walk down the road. And of course, you know, going for a little walk down the road in Africa is not always as relaxing as you would expect. You know, the sun is very hot, the roads are very dusty, you know, and she gets halfway down this road and she's just sort of, and the reason that I really, she gave me a bit of a gift in this scene, because she's walking along and she suddenly becomes aware that there's some Kenyan farmers in the field opposite. And they're just staring at her, just staring. And, you know, nothing more, but she snaps and she turns around and she ends up shouting quite uncomplimentary things at them. And reading it, you know it's not the right reaction. You know that's not what you're supposed to do. And you know that's not a great thing, you know, but you also know it's a very, very human thing. And like you go off to these places and you go off to do good things, and you know it's a moment in your life when you kind of meet the expectation of yourself and the reality of yourself. And here we call it the Mzungu meltdown. Is
Oh my
God. Yeah, the Mzungu is basically the word for a foreigner. And if you go outside in East Africa anywhere, you will get people, kids, sometimes even adults, running down the road sort of shouting Mzungu at you and sort of foreigner. And it's just something people do. And, you know, most of the time it's fine, you brush it off. But when you're having a really bad day, you got stomach cramp, you've eaten something you shouldn't, you're dehydrated, you're hot, you're out for work, you're tired, you can snap and you end up, you know, you're in a new culture, a place where you don't speak the language. It's a lot, and you have a meltdown, and it is like the most undignified state you can possibly be in, but it happens to everybody. And what I really liked about Heidi is she didn't try and gloss over that. She didn't try and excuse it. It was so relatable. And, you know, also, I think as well, when you come here, the British, we're known for being quite retentive, kind of emotionally a bit retentive. Yeah. And I think all foreigners, when we go to other countries, we tend to smile a lot, and we're nodding and smiling at everybody and walking down the street, sort of, you know, like I'm non-threatening, everything's okay, you know, it's all. And I realized I'd been walking everywhere with this sort of polite smile sort of fixed on my face everywhere. And I realized, you know, I wasn't relaxed. And it wasn't genuine. And I think it actually, I was smiling politely to make people feel at ease, but I think people just thought I was really odd. You know, I think somebody smiling all the time is just odd. And reading that gave me permission just to be myself and just to go, you know, I'm not on cloud nine all the time. I'm also not depressed. I'm on a level, and it's okay, you know. And so I really like the fact she talked about that. There's another lady.
It's kind of a matter of like sinking into a different culture as well, because if you use that as a regular defense mechanism in white culture, whether you're in America or Britain, it's kind of everyone does this because we have the social agreement. And if you're in a different land and you think that's what you're supposed to do, and it's just out of water and not working, you have to like realize at some point, oh, okay, this is what people do here. Just let sink in.
Yeah. Very much here. People do not just smile for the sake of smiling here. People are generally quite, you know, stoic sort of about emotions. So yeah, it definitely looked a bit weird. But yeah, I was just going to say there's another lady called Dara Pisano, and she did a similar thing. She used to write articles about development work for The Guardian. And I was very lucky. I actually got to talk to her later on, because I think I sent her some fan mail because she wrote these articles, and one of them was something like, some days I would sacrifice world peace for a chocolate croissant. And, you know, she was just so
great headline.
Yeah. And yeah, so it matters, and it means something when people just write from a place of honesty and say, look, this is the reality of things sometimes. And I think realism is important, especially in development, in any world, because,
yeah, speaking of headlines, they really nailed it with like a title to entice, right? It's not really much about sex. I mean, there are people hooking up in the community, and like expat community will do these things, but other desperate measures, just to sort of explain that. One of my other questions is about of the work. So you're talking about moving to a new place and sort of acclimating to different norms. What about the work that took you there? Having viewed your channel, having read your blog, having like been a parasocial friend for many years now, you always present yourself as someone who's like sure of what they want to do, and very, you know, like, this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to sally forth, right? And is there a way that you have confronted similar sort of shifts in, is this the meaning that I want to dedicate my life to, and having that shift over time, either in writing or in development work, the trainings that you do, or piano work, because that was a left turn.
Yeah. I've had a few left turns through life. Yeah. No, I think I just sort of fall into things. I'm very flattered that you think that I come across as quite
it's
confident.
Weird how people perceive can be so different, right? Because everyone looks at me doing live streams and like, you're totally an extrovert, and I'm like, totally not. No.
Yeah, relate. Yeah. Now, well, also I do think, I mean, I think I am confident in certain aspects, and I think a lot of that comes from having been very not confident when I was a kid. You know, sort of, I did the awkward teenage phase with extra, you know, that sort of, I was afraid, you know, people were looking at me or what they thought of me. And I think you can only do that for so long before it's like, you know, and I think age helps a huge amount. You know, it's true. The older you get, the less you kind of worry so much. If you're lucky, you find your tribe, you find the people who get you. And, you know, I place a lot of that confidence on friends who, you know, I respect and look up to. And I kind of think, well, you know, if they're friends with me, then I must be doing something right, you know. So you kind of help each other through and all of that. In terms of, what was the question?
So the people have like shifting outlook on their work, whether they have total belief in it, whether they doubt the value of it, and seeing how you've shifted from different things. Have you confronted this shifting value proposition as well? And how did it turn out? How did it affect what you do in the world?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I shift from things into other things. Like I spent most of my life as a sign language personage. I worked for a long time in the deaf community. I was training as a sign language interpreter at one point. So from the age of about 14 to the age of, well, just before I came to Rwanda, so about 25-ish, I was sign language. And I thought that was what I wanted to be. And it turned out I didn't. And then sort of I got to this state where I just wasn't sure what to do next. I knew I didn't want to be an interpreter. I was training as that, and that just wasn't a good fit. So I went back into education for a bit, sign language related. And then really coming to Rwanda and VSO was just a roll of the dice. It was, you know, I feel like there isn't really much left that I want to do in the field that I was doing, and in the UK specifically, and I was really just ready for an adventure. So I was looking at various different places, and I think life can sometimes just be dictated by the rope that somebody throws you. You know, if I hadn't got a place on VSO, I would have gone and done something else and probably been just as happy. But you know, they did throw me that, and so I went for it full throttle. And the thing with VSO is because often there's a lack of skills where you're going. So you end up doing lots of things you would never have been allowed to do in the UK without like a master's degree or a doctorate, or, you know, and there are skills that people really need that you didn't realize they needed, but you've got them. And, you know, and you're learning from people all the time. People have been there doing things longer than you have. So by the time you've finished, you've got quite a good arsenal of skills and connections. So, you know, then it just becomes a natural progression onto the next thing, and then onto the next thing. And then I think the pianos, at a certain point, I think with development, I don't know, development is not the whole of development is a problem, but you really have to find the right projects, the things that you feel your energy is invested in. Because, you know, with anything, if you're putting your energy in and you're not getting anything back, then eventually you run out of energy. So you've got to find, you've got to find those bouncy projects. Yeah, exactly. So you've got to find those bouncy projects. And, you know, for a long time, I just wasn't really finding those. So, I mean, I still do a bit of development work, but I guess I'm in a waiting room at the moment. I'm still trying to decide what next, and in the meantime I'm fixing pianos, so
yeah. Nice. And then So another question, we can cut this out if you don't want to, but I'm curious about the writing side, because I feel like you had a long time where you were like stalled out on the latest project and then switched up and then I think went back. So like, where is that sitting right now?
Yeah, still a bit stalled out. There was a few years when I was quite prolific and I was really enjoying writing novels and they were coming really easily. And then I set out to write a novel. I can't remember if I told you about it, but Enheduanna, who was the first ever author in history that we know of, named author. And she had a fascinating life. She was the daughter of the first emperor in history, Sargon of Akkad. And I sat down to write her story. And I realized in order to really get into her story, I had to, you know, explain where she came from a little bit. And so I started writing his story. And it kept going. And it kept going.
Yeah.
And like I had 140,000 words of Sargon of Akkad. And it's not that it's not a good story, but it wasn't the one that I wanted to write. Does that make sense? You know, and I've never quite got over the disappointment of not having stopped myself at the beginning, gone, no, focus on what you should be doing. So now I have this entire novel that I'm still editing my way through at the moment, and another one that I feel I still need to write. And it feels overwhelming a little bit, and I just sort of stopped.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'll get there eventually. Yeah.
Yeah, the question that I asked was about shifting mindsets and feeling like the value wasn't there anymore, and so you have to change. And I feel that's a very similar twist or pivot to like the burnout. And a lot of writers have burnout conversations about like what drove you to it, how did you realize, how did you shift it up? And it's sort of like the recovery never ends. Like you're always trying to like plan for the next thing so that you don't fall into that pit again.
Yeah. And it's also one of those things in life where you are not sure why you didn't stop when you realized you were doing it. You know, it's like I knew like 20,000 words in that this probably wasn't a good idea, but I just kept going. And I do think there's definitely a lesson in there to be learned about, you know, quitting is fine. Stop if you want to, you know, and take a pause, take a beat to consider whether or not what you're doing is what you actually want to be doing. But
a lot of people do not do that, and
no, I didn't.
Why we're where we are. Like I would highlight that phrase and maybe put some like sparkles around the video at this point.
Yeah.
You have to consider what you're doing and whether it's what you want to be doing with your life. So
we are an example to others.
Let my life be an example. Oh dear, we're not there yet. We're good. Okay, so another more general question, if I can edge in with this, is so if your goal in life is to lead a good life, if you have been brought up in such a way that that is the center point, the anchor, rather than, you know, getting enough money to buy whatever. So to lead a good life, what responsibility does that entail toward others or other nations? I feel like a lot of what we see brought up in emergency sex is people grappling in their careers and in their lives with where is my compass, and like how much responsibility do I have toward others and how much responsibility do I have towards myself? So if you've wrestled with those questions, what advice do you have? I
think, I mean, it might be a surprising answer coming from a development worker, but I think it starts and ends with you. I don't think it's selfish to focus on yourself, because unless you are a healthy, fairly happy, rational, sentient, functioning human being, what can you do for other people? You know, and I think in order to function at your best and in order to give something into the world, you got to be okay in yourself. And that takes years. I mean, you don't have to be 100%, but you do have to have an eye on yourself. And I do think, what responsibility, when you say something like, what responsibility do you have to nations? I think that's a very difficult question. I don't think you can think, as human beings, you can't think in terms that big. It's like the whole idea of like saving the world. It's too much. It's, you know, when you take something that big, if you take the weight of the world on your shoulder, you're just going to get crushed under it. And that's where burnout comes from. That's where things get bad, is the image that you can do all of these things because you want to be good and you want to do something useful to the world. But you know, it can spiral so quickly into too much, and then you can't do anything. Then you just kind of so yeah, that's kind of where I look at it. And I think I've been surprised over my career that often the things that I go out and I try and make happen, and I try and think, oh, this would be great, this is going to change things, this is going to be brilliant, and like nobody's listening, nobody is paying the blindest bit of attention. And then I'll give a workshop or a talk, and 3 months later, after I've forgotten all about it, somebody will come up to me in a coffee shop and say, oh yeah, no, I was in that workshop you did, and yeah, you said about this, and I went back to my organization, then we did this and we achieved it. And I'm like, wow. You know, so yeah. You know, the change comes when you're not looking half the time. And I think that's why it's important to be yourself and to find the things that you find you get enthusiasm from, because that's what catches. That's the wildfire. You know, if you're interested in something and enthusiastic, then other people catch that bug and they run with it. And you can't predict or control what people will take, but you can only work on yourself.
Is that guiding your choices on YouTube as well? And we can cut this as well, but I'm like thinking, because you've had a couple different channels, and I'm curious because there's been many different directions, and the things you're doing now I feel are very different from, you know, several years ago. But I mean, I still enjoy them. I like the food tours and like the carpentry shops and all these kinds of fun theaters in the woods kind of stuff. Like how did you go that way? Was it again just like what you were doing and what you thought people would enjoy, or avoiding?
No, honestly, it sounds bizarre, but for me, YouTube for me is just therapy. It sounds funny, but it's a bit like a coloring book.
More sparkles, more sparkles.
Throw the glitter. It's like I find it therapeutic because I like creating things, and it's almost like a coloring book. You know, you get the pictures in the right order and then the music in the right order, and I get lost in that, and I am a bit overwhelmed sometimes that people are watching it. You know what I mean? And then I do start to think, oh, maybe I should be a bit more careful and think a bit more about what I'm posting and what do I want to post. And I don't know. I honestly, so you know, it's a difficult one. I don't know. I haven't got a good answer for that one. I'm just seeing where it goes. Also, you know, in Rwanda we have an interesting little catch-22 because we don't have advertising here. So I watch anything on YouTube. There's no adverts, but if there's no adverts, I'm not making anything from it. So, you know, so and so it's, for me, it's not about money so much, but I do have a bit of a difficulty with it because I used to love blogging. I used to write blogs, and I used to write more books. And I've suddenly discovered that you have time in the day to film and edit videos or to write and edit blogs. And there isn't enough time to do both for me, I find. And so I feel a bit sad because I do feel like the written side of it has dropped off a lot more in favor of the video side. I don't know. Yeah. What about you? I mean, how are you?
The same 24 hours as Beyonce, right? The whole like you have to choose the things that you focus on.
Yeah. I mean, how is YouTube for you? I mean, how do you approach it? What do you,
in terms of choosing content? So
I mean, you've got it pretty sorted, I feel. Yeah.
Well, I went back to the advice about when you create content on any platform, how do you focus what you're going to do? And it's like, have your core areas and sort of rotate between them and figure out what people respond to. And the only part that I haven't attended to is to figure out what people respond to, because whatever, like I'm going to do my things. I'm going to do 2 productivity sprints a month because that's all I can handle. I'm going to do book reviews every other Wednesday. I'm going to do some author content, but not very much because that is mostly happening offline, and book tags for fun and community. And what's the third thing I do on Sundays?
You are prolific. You are focused. You are, yeah. You feel, when I watch your stuff, you just feel very organized. And in comparison, I feel like I'm sort of floating around on the floor going, I don't know what I'm doing today. I'm doing writing up this food. I don't know what I'm doing. Go on a motorbike ride today.
Wow. But it's working. So for like, as a comparison, my channel is stalled at under like 1,100 for almost a year. And yours has continued to rise, even though you don't feel like you're organized in your content approach. So what you are doing is working, my friend.
I think part of it is just the location. I think anybody who's visiting Rwanda, there aren't that many channels talking about travel here. So I think a lot of people tune in for the travel, which is why when I want to talk about books and writing, it's difficult because, you know, I've just done an author tag one. I just did your author tube tags. Yeah. And you know that when I release those on my channel, because it's not about, you know, a hotel in Rwanda or traveling in Rwanda, boom, people just don't tune in. It's like, so like, oh, but I'm going to keep doing it because I enjoy it. So yeah.
That's where I am. So, I mean, there's a very small group of people who are I love seeing what lights you up. And that's why I watch you. And that's why I watch your channel rather than, oh, you came up in a search and I'm looking for this thing that you're providing. They're completely different connections, you know?
Yeah. Very much. Very much. Yeah.
All right. Let's see. I've got 3 more questions if we didn't already cover them. This question is sort of answered by your latest VSO video explaining like what you did the trainings before, which sounded really cool, by the way. So, okay, let's see. This book details enormous frustrations with the failure of human systems and, you know, by implication, the rule of law, which we're dealing with now. Do you know of people working to fix these failures who have hope? Is there anything you can point us to in terms of like if there was a sequel to this that was them later having worked on things that would go back into the cycle and make it better for future aid workers? Or is the job fated to sink into cynicism and burnout? Like, is this just the cycle and there's no penetrating it? What do you think?
I think that's a difficult one. I mean, taking a moment to think about it. I think there's been a steady shift in the way that people think about development work and nonprofit work over about the past 20 odd years, I reckon. I don't like the word cynicism so much because I think often it's misapplied to realism. I think, you know.
Okay.
I don't think. How do you explain it? I think sometimes, I mean, it's like, are you familiar with like the cycle of change and expectation? So when people get sent off as volunteers, you're taught about this cycle that you're going to go through. And it starts off with a sort of crazy optimism. Like you're going abroad, you're going somewhere new, you're really excited. Like, yay, it's going to be fantastic. And then you get there and you hit this wall where things suddenly you realize are a lot more difficult than you think they're going to be. And instead of just sort of going, oh, you know, because you're on this high, you just hit this massive low and then you hit the depression. A lot of people quit at that point. And then you go in varying levels up and down through that over the years until you just level out and life is okay. It's not fantastic and it's not terrible. It's just okay. And I think
that's 100% success. Yeah.
It helps because you need to be able to talk about something and look at something realistically in order to know whether or not you can change it or make a difference. Because if you can't, that's a lot of a waste of energy. But if you can, you know, what do you want to get involved in? What do you want to expend your energy on?
Right.
And I think certainly growing up when I was a kid, and I don't know if it's, you know, tell me if it was different for you, but growing up with all of these telethons and all of these, you know, there was such a hype. Yeah, there was such a hype about, you know, the world's we're going to out of poverty, especially in the 80s. I feel there was a real drive to, you know, the world's going to be a brilliant place. We're going to eradicate racism, sexism, homophobia. It's going to be a brilliant place. I talked to my friend about this is when we were in school. I remember very, very clearly when I was in primary school. And we had to stand up and do this little presentation with just drawn these crayon drawings of the hole in the ozone layer, and, you know, waste in the ocean, and how it was, you know, how it was a really bad thing. But we also felt at that age that by the time we became adults, that was going to be fixed. You know, somebody was on it.
Right.
You know?
Oh my God. Yeah. And instead, flip the script. We have Greta saying, "How dare you? Shame.
How dare you?" Yeah.
Instead, yeah,
and more plastic in the ocean than ever before, and you know, we're still looking at things like Gaza blowing up at the moment, and DRC, and it feels never ending, and again, it can feel overwhelming. But I also remember when I was growing up that the idea of a charity ever doing anything wrong was kind of unthinkable. You know, you would never have said a word against Oxfam. You would never have said a word against, you know, any of the charities. And in that respect, for a long time, they were slightly unaccountable. You know, there's been a lot come out over the years that you went, wow, that really shouldn't have happened. And there's this thing comes to mind at the moment, and it's a very difficult situation because I think it was about 10 years ago or so in the UK, there was a charity called Kids Company or something like that. The scandal probably didn't hit the US, but it was a huge story in the UK. And it was a children's charity for, you know, kids from very poor economic backgrounds. I can't remember all the details, but essentially they did a lot of good work for underprivileged kids. And then they were kind of found to have been cooking the books a bit and things, and there hadn't been the safeguarding that there should have been. And I feel, and I might be wrong, and British people, if you're watching this, leave comments below, let me know if you felt the same, because I feel like that was a turning point in history where people suddenly went, charities aren't automatically good. And then like that, you know, like that expectation cycle went from charities can do no wrong to suddenly every charity is corrupt and everything's wrong and everything's terrible. And I'd say this came out around the same time. And so, you know, it's kind of, people like to know that they've got an inside perspective in things, and they know something that we didn't know before.
They see past the mirage. They're smarter than others. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but that can then colour it the other way to being everything's awful and everything's terrible and nothing ever gets done, which also isn't true.
Baby with bathwater. Yeah.
Exactly. Because if you look back through the history, I mean, you know, people who didn't have, you know, a livelihood are gaining a livelihood. People who didn't have access to education are gaining education. And unfortunately, that good work, as we know, can be undone in a second by, you know, a little dictator or, you know, a changing government. And that is the depressing part, I think, more than the challenges, because we know the challenges are vast and huge. But that's not the bit that kills you. You know, the bit that kills you is having done as much work as you can and seeing the progress made, and then in the sweep of a pen, seeing it completely unmade again. Like when I was watching America and Roe versus Wade, and you just thought the years of blood, sweat and tears that just swept away in a second. You know, and that's where the burnout comes from. That's where the tired comes from, and that's when people quit. But at the same point, I think a lot of it is realism and recognizing that unless it's solid and you're sure it's going to stick, it's not something worth spending your life pouring into, rather than cynicism of thinking we can't change anything. Clearly we can change things. We've changed things throughout the whole of history. But
so yeah, I think part of what we're dealing with in that like cynicism, realism concept of change is, and that moment of like a loss of faith and like, why are we doing any of this anyway? It hits me because I'm not very good at theory and philosophy and ethics. Like that was just the fall down, just the empty in my high school and college education. But when I think about it, I think of how we've had all these revolutions and we've gotten spun into different ways of thinking in history. And I feel like postmodernism and like the world wars and the sort of sinking of idealism and earnestness is still continuing to echo today. And the fact that whenever we find something good, like we're going to have people saying, well, it can't be that. And the rule of law concept that I studied of like, if we have institutions, if we have consequences, if we have transparency, is still something to strive for. It's kind of like, in America, at least, I feel like we have patriotism and co-opted patriotism. And I feel like we have an ideal America that some of us envision and like strive towards that wasn't there at the founding, that has never existed. But if we're constantly trying to make it better, we want to get closer to it. And the realism piece is admitting that it never existed and there's no good old days. And the lack of cynicism is the fact that we're willing to work for like incremental change towards that better ideal. And that is hard. That is why in that structure that you were explaining, you have the people who have succeeded and have made a life for themselves and are happy with where they are because they've been through all those things and sort of managed to even out. But that environment still needs all these new people, all the new blood, all the 100% of new folks, so that we can have like 10% who are still there with the institutional knowledge. I just came off listening to a training from Indivisible. I don't know if New Kings has made it. Sorry, not New Kings. No Kings.
No. If you want a new king, you can put them over. You can have ours.
Yeah. But yeah, so that organizing community and having like things that they're putting out that are knowledge that have left over from previous struggles, and that they're taking wisdom from earlier things like the civil rights struggle and the boycotts in South Africa and all these other things. And trying to pull that out into something that will keep us going, that will keep the most of the 100% of new energy going into the long struggle 10% where people can keep coming back. It's important. That's important. Okay. Let's see. Rule of law. And I had a final one, which was so less on you and less on the book, but more about like environmental factors. Have you noticed among other people who you started with maybe, or that like are in parts of your community now or before, is there a shift in the greater community's perception of the meaning of their work? Is that what I wrote down? Shift in attitudes. Oh, right. So it is back to the book. So the attitudes of the aid workers arriving, idealists, and then leaving and sort of sorting out their lives very differently after their 10 years of experience. Do you notice that people come into the field? Like if you see new folks in Rwanda or in other communities that you're part of, do they come with more of a guard up? Do they come with like armed with those pragmatic lessons, or is it still the same machine?
I'm going to be honest, there's a bit of a stagnation. I'm not the best person to ask at the moment because I'm not really, sort of waist deep in it at the moment. I stepped back for a bit of a breather, but there is a bit of a stagnation in as much as, I think, when was it? I feel like I want to say 2000 and... Oh, I don't know. No, I'm not going to guess. I'm going to get it wrong. But the Canadian development organization, CEDA, they closed their doors. DFID closed their doors. From what I understand, I lost a job because DFID closed overnight and my funding evaporated. And then USAID have closed it. So there's been a mass trend now towards closing international, like development. Governmental development organizations. The ones that do exist are vastly underfunded a lot of the time. With the layoff from USAID, most of the development workers who still want to remain as development workers, they're all going for the same jobs. So before, you might get 2 or 3 companies going for a contract. Now you're talking 50 and upwards, and it's saturated because a lot of people, I'm going to say it, but a lot of people at USA don't want to go back to the US. They want to continue doing their work in other countries. And of course, where do you go at that point? Because it's really, really difficult. And there's also, you feel like there's definitely governmental lack of will from a lot of Western countries to continue or to start new funding projects and to sustain that in the same way that they used to. A lot of it's now transitioning over to businesses in the private sector and social enterprises, and Certainly there's been a huge push over the years, both in the UK and here in Africa, towards young people becoming entrepreneurs. And, you know, the idea is that if they become entrepreneurs, they're going to create jobs, and that's a dangerous avenue to go down. For many reasons. You know, the idea that, you know, the government and standard businesses don't have any jobs for anybody now. So young people fresh out of college in debt and never having had work experience are going to pick up the slack, and they're going to save the economy is too much to put on young people. You know, if you look at the old statistics, I don't know if they're true anymore, but, you know, 70% of small to medium businesses failed within the first 3 years. Imagine that. You know, you're out of university, you've already shouldering student debt. You try and open a business with no experience, because that's what you've been told you need to do to save the economy and to employ people. 3 years later, that fails and you're in even more debt, and you've let down all the people that you employed. I mean, that's a disastrous thing to put on young people. You know, and people, there is kind of this buzzword of entrepreneurship, and every now and again it works. But, you know, a lot of the places training people in entrepreneurship say, oh, yeah, but it's a mindset. If you fail the first time, you just pick yourself up. And because you're an entrepreneur, you can think of a new thing to do. And you've got that spirit. People need jobs.
It's a shell game. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. And all the time, people are paying these entrepreneur organizations to teach them how to become an entrepreneur. You know, I think the debt crisis for young people, the lack of jobs. Anyway. But
what you're making me think of is the book I just finished. So I just checked the schedule, and in 2 days from now, when this airs, I'm going to be talking about Hell Followed With Us, as well as 1984 with Ben's Corner. And in his Hell Followed With Us by Andrew Joseph White, the situation is post-apocalyptic, where there's a parasitic virus that has been released, and a religious group is helping it along and trying to kill off people who are non-believers. And the survivors, there's non-believers' children who are at an LGBTQIA center, were there when it happened and have just like formed a community. And there's a like doomsday prepper community of adults, of like older folks, grown folks with lots of weapons, and they trade. And the trade is that the adults pay the young kids in food that they have preserved for the young kids to go out and risk their lives being killed with the religious folks, to kill them. And so it's just like this. Having prepared for their own selfish needs, now they're gonna trade with the young folks who are most at risk to go out and do the jobs that they're too cowardly to do. Is just a really, really stark comparison to our current thing with the economic thing you just mentioned. But for me, it also recalls just like climate denial and foisting the responsibility for adapting as best as we can onto younger generations, which is just,
and then also telling them that they're lazy and they don't focus, and that they don't, when they clearly look at this and go, well, actually, no, you know, this is not something. Again, it's putting the weight of the entire world on them and saying, there you go, we couldn't carry it, you deal with it. And it's whilst implementing policies and legislation that just makes it even harder for them. It's problematic.
Oh, generational stuff. We should have a whole other talk about that.
We should actually. Yes, we should. Yes.
Okay. So I'm making a note that I should ask you to come on for a TRC talk later, because that would be really great. I have another series that is not in August, but every month trying to talk about truth and reconciliation for the climate. And that is sort of that generational exchange that we're so
Can I make an awful confession? I wasn't into. I know that you're running that series, and I didn't fully engage with it because I felt a bit like there were so many things we're focusing on here at the moment, and climate change is affecting us. I mean, our seasons are all over the place at the moment, but I wasn't sure that I could fully engage with another sort of development topic at that moment. But yes, and the generational thing, and especially population, is a topic I find fascinating. And yeah, would love to come on and talk some more about and catch up with the other episodes that you've done. when I'm tranquil.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this series is Agitation August. So I'm both trying to ask people about what gets them agitated or has in the past and fired up their work ethic or their, you know, their seeking in life. And the other one is more of like grief counseling, because I feel like we're in a place where, at least in America, we just screwed over everyone. And so now we're trying to figure out, how do we pick up the pieces? How do we survive this? How do we not completely go into a denialist depression?
I think that might be why I step back ever so slightly, because we have a very different media outlet here. I will talk about this in another episode, but you know, most of the time our newspapers, they might be a bit hyperbolic, but they're generally quite positive. Every day something new has been improved, or something's been developed, or somebody's done something good. And you know, the news that you consume, and we'll talk about this in a different episode, I won't go into it too much, but it does have a real effect on your psyche. You know, and it might not always be completely always true all of the time, but it makes you feel good. It makes you feel like the next day is gonna be better than it is today, and for the most part it generally is. So yeah, I also don't, I feel for America and also for the UK, because they're in a big depression at the moment. You know, I mean, I say their politics. I haven't followed UK politics for a very long time, but nothing about it makes me want to, if that makes sense. But it's about self-care again, and you've got to curate what you take in a little bit, because I think otherwise it's overwhelming. It's but yeah, but I will engage with those episodes and catch up. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, this has been fabulous. We've reached our hour, and so we got through all my questions. Did you have any questions or like points that you wanted to bring up, either about the book or about the greater agitation of the world at the moment?
No, just I guess a small question, but yeah. What's the meaning of life? Little questions.
Yeah, I don't know what I would say. The first idea that comes to my head is community, because I think we're social animals and we need it to survive, and that's really what I'm working hardest at this point. So yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. I was erring towards chocolate, but I mean, that's a valid answer.
Well, being in Rwanda, you can say that. I have to face the possibility of like going without for long periods of time in the future.
Yeah.
Although you have said that it's hard to get it in a country that is a producer, which is like, tragedy.
True. No, this was really fun. Thank you for having me on. Yeah,
of course. Thank you for coming on and being a part of the show. My very high-tech banner to say thank you for coming and watching, everyone in the audience. And thank you to Marion for being a Agitation August guest. We couldn't take questions because this had to pre-recorded for technical reasons, but I'm sure Marion will not mind coming by after the launch date and answering questions in the comments. So if this has aroused your curiosity or your indignation or your burning fire, please leave comments down below and we will come back to react to them. Everybody, thanks for watching. Take care of yourselves and pick up a good book, and you know, happy reading. Good luck in the world today.